All right. This is going to be a fun lecture. A little bit. It's a little bit of sarcasm, mostly because, like, again, if y'all have the chance and you choose to, definitely get your booster shot and your flu shot. Just make sure that the next day you don't have anything important like, teaching a lecture. Definitely feel like two bats whacked me on both sides. But hey, I'm always a big fan of if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. So let's make this a fun lecture and let's talk about some cool stuff. So first, let's go ahead and get a couple of announcements out of the way. So first, making sure that online can hear me. Hello, hello, hello. All right, so sweet. All right, so first announcement. So everybody's extension should be put in, especially if you're in my sections. Even if you didn't request the extension, I usually go ahead and say, hey, I see that you missed your deadline. Here's the extension. Realize the extension is all the way until Thursday. Anything submitted on Friday is a 0. So make sure that you get in what you can. Now, if you're still working on the props, definitely get those done. But keep in mind, try to make sure that if you are going to that extension, that you get something submitted. Now, if you submit something that is like less than 5 props, that's okay. You at least get some points on the board. But the main thing is that realize that you have to fill out that quota, which is you need to have those 5 props with textures. Now, we give you a little bit of leadway once you get past that deadline and say, hey, just pick whatever is the quickest thing for you to model and go about your business. But as far as the extension, make sure that you're meeting that. Next, we're going to have to talk about the elephant in the room, especially when it comes to a couple of the UV tools that we're about to show, and just also UV editing in general, which is Maya's extremely broken on Monterey, which a lot of people have. Now, how many people have gone through the process of downgrading their OS? I have no idea what the steps are. I see that one person is doing it. Yeah. So with that said, another option, and again, this is off the record, even though we're kind of talking and it's being recording, is realize that you can install Windows on your machine. Now, I can actually upload a video, by which I mean, I take no responsibility on making sure that it actually works, but from what I hear, it's a lot easier just to install Windows than to actually run the update downgrade. With that said, just let you know, Windows, you can operate it for free without having to pay for it, as long as you're okay with at the bottom of the corner. It's like, hey, will you pay for me eventually? No. So definitely read up on the idea of Boot Camp and Boot Camp Assistant. That will actually update and give you Windows. And from there, hopefully you get less issues working with these softwares. Now, I will try to actually illustrate and also talk about the workarounds that we can do with Monterey, but there is like 2 major issues that are popping up with it that may prevent you from doing your UVs. We will talk about that when we get to it. Now, everything else on Monterey, you should be perfectly fine. Now, let's see, anything else? What does that mean, the other assignments for week 3? Week 3 is due next Monday, so you still have some time. And also, again, your week 3 assignments is also all the week assignments, and then your competency 3, which is Lego Man, which there is tutorials for every part of that process. Everybody is aware of the video tutorials? Anybody who's not aware? All right, not seeing any hands. Awesome. So, with that said, all right, so the Lego Man has videos for every part of the process. If you go to section 3.5, look through the different videos, realize each one of those videos past the overview one is a playlist, which means that there's multiple videos. If you just watch the videos that are embedded in the web browser, then you're going to pretty much be skipping around the process. Make sure that you are clicking view this on YouTube so you can actually get access to the playlist. Outside of that, I don't think that there is anything left. Is the Lego Man due this Thursday? No, it is due next week at Monday. Now, Thursday is your extension deadline. for your week 2. So if you're still working on your week 2, you have to get it in by Thursday. Turning in on Friday is a 0. All right. With that said, as far as support, campus, obviously you still have lab today and you have lab on Friday. Online, there is a Discord help session happening with Lauren today. I believe also on Thursday we have Erica. No, actually, I think Wade in the Discord help session as well too. So definitely check that out. Friday is going to be when we are going through the process of taking your props from Maya, getting them arranged, getting them set up, and bringing them into Unreal. So it's a little bit different from my prior lectures because literally that lecture is going to be a tutorial of how to just do it. All right. Now, what I typically like to do is as I go through grading your assignments, especially for my sections, I'll pick one that is a good representation of what we like to see. And then I, sight unseen, bring it and do the whole entire tutorial. The idea is that I'm hoping that that scene has a ton of issues. So that way we can run into as many errors as possible, bring it into Unreal. So that way I have many chances to show you how we troubleshoot stuff. All right. So be prepared for that. Also let you know, usually Friday, that lecture is the shortest lecture. All right. So with that said, anybody have any questions? Dead silence. No yeses, no nos, maybes, random words. What's up? Is it a definite thing that you have to downgrade? It's a game of time. So if Maya somehow comes out with a new update that fixes all the issues with Monterey, you can hold your breath and wait for that. I wouldn't do that. If you can and you understand how to do the downgrade version, go for that. I'm not a huge opponent to the idea of putting both operating systems on your computer. So you have the ability to bounce back between all of them. And from what I've seen of the steps and hearing from students, it may be easier to do just Windows, all right? So I think that's the biggest thing that like makes people shy away from Windows is because they see the price tag, realize you can use 90% of Windows and also almost all your software without having to pay a dime. As long as you're okay with not changing your background or your screensaver. Anybody can live with that? All right. So if you haven't yet, well, actually, I don't know how many people watch Linus Tech Tips. All right. They have a great video talking about what you can and can't do with Windows if you don't pay for it. All right. So as far as OSs, definitely, again, we not OSs, but browsers, Safari. Not saying that Safari is bad. It's just that our website, Full Sail Online, is terrible on Safari. All right. So again, Firefox, Chrome. Some people are saying that Opera is running fine with it too. But all things said, when you turn something in, wait 10 minutes, go back and check if it's still there. That's the best thing I can suggest. All right. All right. Any last questions before we start? Other than the fact that I need to unfreeze the screen so you can see what I can see. All right. Would you be able to read down the download software? So Unreal wants you to learn it on everything. So they pretty much, you can install it on every machine you've ever owned. Substance and Maya, both of them come with 2 keys. Pretty much you can run it on 2 different machines without having to log another machine out. All right, so you can have it running on 2 different machines at the same time. What's up? Yes, so somebody just asked if there's any way to up that number. How much money do you have in your wallet? Yeah, so again, so free to when you have money, more. So essentially 2 is the max, and then they eventually want you to start paying for it. All right. And then also to let you know, essentially what would happen if you install it on 3 computers, it'll just ask you the question of like, hey, which one do I need to deactivate? Especially with Photoshop or any of the Adobe products, it will pull up all the computers that it's installed on, and it just tells you like, hey, which one do you want to deactivate? So it becomes a game of like, musical chairs, because you can always deactivate if you need to. All right, so with that said, that's my suggestion. Again, it is not really full sales policy or anything like that, but that is my suggestion to y'all. Now, with that, let's go ahead and start talking about today's lecture, which is UVing and layout. So week 1, we introduced the Maya and Unreal and the concept of the 3D environment. Week 2, we started getting into basic tools and how we start creating objects and UVing them. But we kind of gave you like, a very, very bare explanation of them, because we wanted you to experiment with the concept of how we construct stuff and also how we lay objects out. Now, Monday is when we actually started like reeling you in and talking about, hey, let's start talking about edge flow. How do we purposely place edges? How do we use more complex concepts and also complex tools to make more complex objects? Today is where we start reeling you in on your UVs and talking about the concept of how do we take objects that are more of the hero model, which is the main focus of our game, our movie, and setting up their UVs for us to paint unique detail. Because so far, when you lay out your UVs, you're laying them out more in the factor of, hey, we're going to apply repeatable textures and we're just going to see it repeat over and over again. We're not going to worry about seams. We're not going to worry about patterns or anything like that. So today, we're going to be talking about collage layout, which is essentially every part of our object fitting into the 0-1 space. Remember, the 0-1 space is the area of our UV editor where our texture is displayed. Even though we have all these grids, there's only one segment that is actually having information provided. Well, with collage layout, we take every part of our object, have it in the 0-1 space, have it no overlapping, maintain that textile density. Who remembers what textile density is? Yes, so essentially the same size ratio, so the pattern doesn't look like it's higher res in one area and lower res in the other area. And the fact is that this will allow us to take it into other programs and paint in detail. While it does seem like we are minimizing the amount of resolution that we're providing to it, it does help us work with something that we're going to be talking about next week, which is going to be Sunday, which is physically based rendering, which is the idea of when we use our shaders, what's really seeing it is our UVs. And that's UVs is how we provide that information. Now, the first thing that we always see with objects is color. But color is only one part of what makes an object look the way that it does. We have to provide more information outside of just color to our object. And with a collage layout, we don't have to produce as much information to provide that information to our object. Now, what is collage format? I already explained that. What is the advantages over tiling? We're able to do unique detail, and we're also able to control where it goes. What is the disadvantages? Well, we have to hand paint it. Right now, when you apply a repeatable texture to your object, you don't really have to think about your UVs too much. As long as they're not a mangled mess, you can usually get a good result with repeatable textures because, again, it's just repeatable. The whole idea is that it blends into itself. Meanwhile, with collage layout, you have to purposely paint the information in a certain spot or it won't display properly. If the UV layout is not set correctly, then it will display wrong on your object. Now, let's go ahead and review the processes that we went about laying out our UVs. So I'm gonna go right here, open up Maya. I thought I already did. And again, I'm opening up 2020.4. Still a lot of people I'm seeing are using that 2022. And I can tell because it issues a color space warning when you open it up in 2020.4. But let's go right here and wait for mine to load a little bit because we have that little hitch. All right, now we're good. All right. So I'm gonna bring that down. I'm gonna go right here. I'm gonna go File, Open, set my project, and we are gonna set it to our introduction to 3D Kenso. So we're gonna go right here, 7, set that, hit set, go to scenes, and load up my shirt. And this is how I know that, because I actually built this in 2022. So when we see that, we can tell that you actually are using 2022. But with that said, let's go ahead and review how we UV. So when I talk about UV, again, it is the process of taking our object that is 3D and laying it flat. Same way that if we were to look at this object from the idea of tailoring our objects or being a seamstress, that is essentially the reverse process of how we build a shirt. So right now we have the design that is cut out, and then essentially what a person would do is stitch it together and we would have a 3D object. UVing is that concept in reverse. Now, we can do that multiple different ways. So if we go right here to Workspace and go to UV Editing, we can get access to not only our UV editor next to our perspective view, but also we get access to our UV toolkit. Now, in this case right here, we have a mess of a shirt. So we're going to really hit home the concept of the big 3. The big 3 is what you have to do before you even start UVing. That hurt a little bit right there. But anyway, so the big 3 is, remember, UVing is not a concurrent action. You cannot model and UV at the same time. You have to be done modeling, because if you're creating more vertexes, more faces, you're creating more UVs and destroying them when you delete stuff. So number 1, you have to be done with your model. Number 2, you have to be clean. That means any problem geometry on our object can affect the way that our tools work. And so far, hopefully everybody's realized our tools allow us to produce results faster. So we want them to actually be as quick as possible. The second that we have issues, that adds a lag to our participation in modeling. So first, we have to be done. Second, we have to be clean. So I'm gonna go right here, hit the cleanup tool, and I'm gonna do select all matching geometry, apply to selected object, faces with more than 4 sides, faces with holes, lambda faces, non-manifold geometry. Again, we do not look for concave faces. We do not look for non-planar faces. The best result to actually look for those is just hover around your object. I'm sure it has a beer belly. But anyway, so, but the fact is that we hover around. If we see any flickering, then that is an issue with those right there, but we don't go searching for them because we're still low poly modeling, which means that we're going to push and pull on our geometry. But now with this selected, I'm going to hit apply, and it's coming back clean. Realize if you have problem geometry, then you're not officially done with your model. So it kind of takes you back to step 1. Lastly, number 3, we have to reset our UVs. So if we look at this right here, and this is the one that people forget, we can wiggle around with not being done with our model. We can wiggle around with having a little bit of problem geometry. You can't mess with step 3, which is look at that mess right there. Let me go ahead and turn off the checker pattern and turn off the display. That's its current UVs. The reason why it looks like that is because this shirt started its life out as a cube that I just started extruding, adding different edges to, and eventually became this shape. But the UVs don't know that. They're still in the state of mimicking that cube that got created. When you create geometry primitives, they already have their UVs laid out. But when we start adding complexity to it, well, the UVs are not able to evolve. So what we need to do is reset this back to a state that forces it to sew itself back together. It does not lay out our UVs, but it gets us in a state where we can actually start making purposeful cuts and separations. And to do that, we can either select the entire object, go to UVs, and hit it with a planer in any direction. The idea is that with a planer, with the whole thing selected, it will force everything to sew each other back together because it does not actively add cuts. But my favorite way is with it selected, we can go right here to camera base. Camera base is a planar map from whatever angle my camera is looking at. So if I go right here, camera based, biggity boom, is all sewn back together. Those 3 stages have to be done for us to not run into major issues with UVs. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to solve all your problems. There is still the concept of UVing. But if you can do those 3 and make sure that they're done, then it's going to be less of a headache when we go to start cutting this apart. Now, with that, we have 2 ways that we can go about laying this out. First way, we can just start selecting an area. In this case, let's say I want this entire area right here. Now, I wouldn't actually cut it this way. I would actually kind of like cut it apart the same way that I would actually rip a shirt apart by the seams. But let's say I wanted to lay this out right here. Well, I could select this and use the projection method. So I just select all the faces that I want to select and choose the best projection for this right here, which if it goes around like that, what would probably be the best projection for me? Cylindrical, because cylindrical wraps around my object and then adds in a vertical cut so that way it can come apart. As I hit every key except for the one that I need to. Now, if you ever need this to come back, if that is the last option that you hit, you can hit T. Once you select the input that you're trying to use, so right here, go back to projection, select it in the inputs, and then I can hit T as Tom, and that will bring back my manipulator. But in this case, this looks good enough. And as you can see, it lays out kind of nicely. All right. So that's fine. That's projection method. Now, also, if I want to, I can just go right here and select an edge that goes around where I want to cut. And then what tool can I use? Yep, just cut. Just go right here, hit cut. Now, again, remember, when we're messing around with UVs, we can only really move them inside of our UV editor. So do not try to move around faces or anything like that. You're not going to have a fun time. Make sure that when you're going to UV editor mode, we are going into UV shell or UV. Now, with that said, I'm going to go right here, just make a cut. Hit cut. And then with this right here, now that I have a cut in there, I can hit unfold and we'll lay out. Now, those are 2 methods. Realize they are just different methods to get to the same result. I can select objects and pick a projection type that will lay out flat, or I can just select the seams where I want it with the edges and then just hit cut. If I want to also, that edge selected, I could sew that back together if I wanted to. It's so. Now, this always scares people right here, but remember, UVs are indestructible. All I need to do is just re-grab this, hit unfold, and it's now in less of a gnarly position. Still like pretty bad because again, it's just kind of squishing it down and it's going to cause stretching, but we can sew it back together, hit unfold, and kind of get back to a nicer look for it. But again, we have projection, we have cut. And then we're going to introduce one more. Now, any one of these three will give you the same results. It just comes down to convenience and what you feel makes the most sense. And that's where we introduce the 3D cut and sew tool, which is the ability to take a tool that cuts and sew and actually make these selections inside the 3D perspective view. So let's go right here. I'm going to delete that. And we're going to go back to our friend right here. So this is already went through the big three. So what we're going to do, let's go right here to UV. UV 3D cut and sew. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind with this right here. When we activate the 3D cut and sew, it changes our shaded mode on our UV. So remember, shaded mode is how previously we saw which direction our UVs were facing. Blue was what? What does blue mean? Correct, it was facing towards us. Red meant that it was facing away from us. Well, this overrides that and switches it from front and back facing to multicolor, because this will actually change color as we separate our objects into different shells, giving us visual feedback. Now, next key statement, which is the colors are picked at random. This alarms students because when you do a tutorial, especially with the Lego Man, you want your stuff to look exactly like mine. And when it comes to this tool, these colors are picked at random, which means you may get different colors from what I am showing. That's perfectly fine. Also, if you ever use any kind of music random player, occasionally you will get the same color in the row. So be prepared for that. But again, just warning you. But with that said, with the 3D cut and sew tool right here, going to UV, 3D cut and sew, all right. What this will allow us to do is double click on an edge loop, and it will follow it all the way around, making a cut. As you can see, when I cut all the way around, it separated this and made a complete new UV shell. Now, this will only work if it's a complete cut. If there is one edge that is keeping our UV shells together, then it's considered still one UV shell. But if it's a complete cut, it will be able to separate. Again, the best way to test that is to right click, go into UV shell mode, and then see how this is separated. Now, if I wanted to sew this back together, I can hold down Control. With Control held down, I can double click on that edge again. As you can see, it sews back together. So just double clicking on it will cut it. Control clicking will sew it back together. And that is like 95% of UV. Now, let's go ahead and Z back. The other cool part about doing this with the 3D cut and sew tool is, if you remember earlier, when I selected the edge, it went all the way through my object and it ignored the fact that they are different shells. 3D cut and sew tool actually observes the fact that this is separated. So when I double click this edge, it will stop when it hits the shell seam. Allow me to very quickly make that inside cut of the armpit and hit unfold, biggity boom, we got our sleeve. We can continue doing this on the other side. As you can see, this is pretty much purple and then a slightly lighter purple. That happens a lot. That's why it's always good to go right here to UV shell and test whether or not it got separated. And what we want to do is make cuts so that way we can intuitively lay it flat. The idea is that we want to minimize seams, but also minimize stretching. Remember, seams and stretching are on opposite sides of our seesaw. It's okay to have it wiggling around in the gray area, but when we have one side dipping and hitting the ground, that's when we have an issue. Here, we're actually get the advantage of actually hiding our seams in the area where we have seams. So literally we are hiding them in plain sight. Unfold. And then last but not least, let's go ahead and separate this from the front and back. So we're gonna go right here. Got that. Got that. Got that. Got that. So that way, you can bring this over, bring that over. And again, I'm selecting the shell by double clicking on just one UV. And then I hit unfold, hit unfold. And then go through the last little process of transform, selecting this one right here, sampling our textile density, applying it to the rest, hit set, and then putting this in the 0-1 space. Again, the 0-1 space right here is the one that is denoted by the fact that we have a 0 and a 1 right here, but most importantly, these lines right here. Trust me, nothing is worse than the feeling of you do an amazing layout for all your objects for your assignment, and then you get a 50 because you had it in a different box. And you may think that's harsh, but the fact is you can do an amazing layout, and then when you bring in the Substance Painter, you can't do anything because it's only looking for that one box. Bring that right there. Bring that right there. And we're pretty good. So now we have it on the 0-1 space without any overlapping, maintain that textile density. And then last but not least, we need to double check whether or not they're facing the right way. So like I said, it changes the shaded mode to multicolor. We just need to go right here to view, shaded, hit this option box, and tell it to go back to front and back facing and hit apply. Make sure that's all blue. Now, the last thing that I want to do is to, because there has been a bug in Maya for years now, that you'll lay this out, delete your history, save it, reopen it, and then your UVs are somewhere else. So what we want to do is lock these UVs in place. And to do that, we're just going to right click, go to UVs, select all of them, and go to this top category called pinning and hit pin. It will turn this blue color. And essentially what we're doing is essentially locking our UVs in place. So selecting our UVs and hit pin. Now, when we try to move this, nothing will move until we go right here and unpin it. What's up? All these green dots, these are actually our UVs. Yeah, so green dots are UVs. Remember, there is a vertex for every UV. Think of it as vertex is a point in 3D space. A UV is a point in 2D space. They are living in two different parallel dimensions. They exist, coexist, but you can move them independently of each other, but you can't have one without the other. That's why I can go right here, delete all my UVs. and nothing really happens. Yeah, they're not there, but they're actually still there. All I have to do is just select my object again. And reproject them, and they're back. All right, you can't destroy UVs. As long as we have vertexes, we have their 2D counterpart, the UV. Now, hopefully you don't have to do that. Instead, we can just Z back, get back to our laid out UVs. But for every vertex, there's a UV. Vertex are yellow, UVs are green. All right, any questions? All right, so let's put that in practice right here. So we're going to go through the entire process, not only on a shirt, but also a pair of scissors. So I'm going to go right here and grab our only lecture activity for today, which is the scissors. So go right here, grab the scissors, and open this up, copy this, and then we're going to go right here, documents, 3DF, go to week 3, we're in lecture 7, and then we're going to paste this. From there, I'm not going to save this, file new, don't save, but I'm going to go right here to file, open, set project, set it to scissors, the main directory of the scissors, hit set, and then go right here to scenes, scissors. All right, so with that done, so one of the first things that you may run into with your object, especially if you're on Monterey, which is your UV 3D Kaizen tool may not work in the 3D view. Luckily, if we need to, because what may happen is that when you go to use the 3D Kaizen tool, you'll click right here, but then it will actually activate something way up away from your cursor. That will happen. Just let you know, the workaround is, luckily, you can make those selections inside of the UV editor, and they should work. So that is the first bug that we've been finding out, and I think it mostly hits 2022. It should not happen on 2020, but again, Monterey, our best friend, has been like showing all kinds of new stuff. But with that said, we'll kind of hit those issues and the workarounds that we can do as we come across them. Now, first, with this object, we need to go through the process of the big 3. So first, are we done with these scissors? And I finally said it right. All right. Scissors look done. I think I said it right. I think I said it right. Anyway, so as far as I'm concerned, I'm done with modeling these scissors. They're done. All right. So my next stage is I need to go through the process of making sure that it's clean of problem geometry. So if we go right here, we want to go to mesh. We want to go to cleanup. We want to hit that cleanup button. We want to go into options. Let's go ahead and reset this and go through the process of setting this up. Again, we don't want Maya to clean up for us. So we want to only select based off the criteria that we're giving it. We can either apply to selected objects or apply to all. That really comes down to scope. How much information do I want to see at one time? I like to get the big picture and then start drilling down. So I'm going to do all polygon objects. Next, we're going to go right here, faces more than 4 sides, which is n-gons, faces with holes, lambda faces, and non-manifold geometry. So these are the main ones that we're going to look for. Now we can do that last catch-all, which is edges with 0 length. That is going to pretty much find those extra extrudes. So pretty much if we have extrude that's on top of another extrude, this will find it, because remember, as far as mine is concerned, it's not an issue, but it's an issue for us. Once we do that, I'm going to go right here, hit apply, and it is going to light up like a Christmas tree. All right, so at this stage, to make my life simpler, let's get out of UV editing because it's giving me a lot of visual feedback that I do not need right now. I don't need to see all my UV seams. I do not need to see all my UV colors. So instead, I'm gonna go right here to UV workspace, switch back to classic. So that way I can see all these. All right, so we're getting a mixture of faces selected, we're getting yellow verts, we're getting green verts. And again, we're getting a big picture to get an idea of how much is wrong. This gives us a chance to kind of gauge whether or not how much time we need to spend on this right here. But now that we have an idea of what is all wrong, we have to narrow it down. So from here, I'm going to switch to apply to selected objects, and then I'm going to click everything off except for one. And then we're going to assembly line this right here. We're going to go part by part, removing one issue at a time. Then once we're done, we're going to switch to the next one and repeat the process. The idea is that each one of these issues have a specific fix that usually helps them get corrected. So to keep our mind kind of focused and also, be efficient, we're just sticking to one fix at a time until we have to change gears once we are completely done fixing that one issue. So first one that we're going to do is more than 4 sides. So let's go right here. Let's select one object and focus on that. I'm going to hit apply, and we have some ink guns right here. So can anybody guess what probably happened in this area? Yeah, we beveled, but we missed some edges. So again, going back to, you have to bevel. That's a polishing phase. That's how you define your edge quality. That's how you make your stuff look more realistic. But when you bevel, 1, you want to save it to like the end of the process, and 2, you want to always double check beforehand. You have a question? So double check your settings right there, and also make sure that you select it before hitting it. Also, another thing that like people accidentally do is that they don't set it to selecting matching geometry. They set it to clean up first, and then it will go through and clean it up for you, but then it'll make like kind of like a mangled mess. And just kind of show you what that looks like. Let's go right here. And again, if you're watching this later as an archive, please do not do what I'm about to do. This is not the right process, but this is what it would look like if I go right here and have it clean everything up. Notice how like it kind of butchered a lot of my edge flow right there. Maya cleaned it. It is correct in its eyes, but it butchered all my edge flow. It's going to make my life harder when it goes to UVing because I need those edge loops to actually accurately cut stuff apart. If this was a singing, dancing pair of scissors, now it's not going to animate correctly. Again, make sure that you're not having Maya clean up for you. So I'm going to go right here, Z back. And then we're going to do this one by one. So first, select this, hit apply, and make sure I actually take my advice and set it back to select. So we get these right here. So in a case like this, it's not going to be that hard to surmise where we need to draw in our edges. So essentially what we need to do is just continue the bevel. Now, some people may go like, all right, cool. Do you just select this and just rebevel? You can, but it can leave some issues right here, especially if we're looking right here. We're getting some wonkiness right here. Now, is it terrible? No, it's just creating more problem geometry in this area that we have to fix. And honestly, it's a little bit more of a headache. So instead, what I like to do is surgically add in that bevel. And what can help us is find and look at the other area, the bottom. That can give you a template of what you need to draw. So in this case, we just need to continue these edges around there. So with that, I'm gonna hold on shift right click, go to multi-cut, and continue this around. Draw right there. We're gonna draw straight across that corner and connect up to there. Same way, draw, 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 draw. And again, I'm hitting the right click to enter in that line without dropping my tool. Now at this state, I no longer need these edges. So I'm gonna hold down Shift right click and delete edge. Or if I want to, Control delete. Control delete. Select those edges, hit Control delete. But then we still have a N-gon right here. So if we look underneath, we can get idea that what needs to happen. So we got a quad right there, quad right there. So what probably needs to happen to this edge? Merge it. Yep, merge it down or collapse it. Now, to distinguish these two, right now I only have one edge selected. So merge edge to center and collapse will do the same thing. Now, but that does not mean that they are the same tool. If I go right here and to show the difference between them, let's go ahead and select all these edges. If I select all those edges and hit Shift right click and tell it to merge to center, well, that does exactly that. It merges everything to the center. Meanwhile, collapse is great when we need to get rid of a edge ring. Remember, edge ring is a sequence of parallel edges that go around our object. So if we collapse them, it will collapse them down, essentially removing them. So if you remember us talking about that eye screw from Monday, how if we didn't match up 20 on one side and 20 on the other side, collapsing would have been the way that we would actually fix that. We would actually grab one of the edge rings and just collapse it down. So that way we brought down that number to where we have 20 on both sides. Now, with that said, we're gonna bring that back. And honestly, I'm gonna go right here. You don't have to do it, but it does help with tweaking out our verts, but essentially we're adding in that bevel by hand. So with that selected, I'm gonna hit apply. And now it's not selecting anything, which is awesome. So now we're gonna move to the next piece. What's up? So if it still lights up, it may be remembering your prior selection. I'm surprised it hasn't happened to me so far in any of these lectures, but occasionally it will relight up with the same issues. Double check those issues, make sure that they're clean, but it could be remembering your selection. So what you want to do is clear your selection by selecting all the faces in face mode and then clicking off to deselect them, and then go back into object mode and then run the tool again. All right, so with that, we're gonna select this. We're gonna hit apply, and we got a giant N-gon right here. It also looks like another type of issue. Anybody remember what that issue is? Yep, face with a hole. Now, again, heavy-handedly, I add in this issue to kind of like show it off, but there is really no indent right there. So we're gonna just go ahead, select that face in face mode. I'm gonna double click this part right here since it's separated from the rest of the object. Allow me to very quickly select all those faces on the inside and delete those as well too. Now at this point, we need to patch this hole. To do that, I'm gonna double click on an edge. It's going to select all the border edges around there, or the boundary edges, border or boundary. It is a good sign when I double click on it, it's going all the way around that hole, which is a good indicator that I can actually go right here to Shift right click and tell it to fill hole. Now, lastly, we need to just connect it up. Luckily, if we look at the top and the bottom, left and right, we have the same number of edges kind of going into them. So essentially we just connect one to the other. Now, like with the dial bottle, we have to double check to make sure if there's a certain direction that we have to draw them to maintain its silhouette. That's flat. We can choose either or. What's up? Fill hole and bridge. So bridge will only, so what somebody asked was, what's the difference between fill hole and bridge? Fill hole will fill a hole. That means it will actually fill all the connections that go from like left, right, top, and bottom. Meanwhile, bridge will only bridge between two edges that are directly across from each other. So if I was to go right here, select this and go right and shift right click, hit bridge. Actually did, damn it. All right, so what it was supposed to do is kick back an error and say, hey, there is conflicting directions because essentially it can't figure out how to draw a bridge between the left and the right and then also have it going from like top to bottom. That's why when we were doing the eye screw, we deselected the horizontal edges because it would actually shot a face through the entire coil because it would try to connect those up. What's up? Yep. So yeah, like a bridge is very peculiar. Meanwhile, same way with like hole. If we missed like one edge right here. So if I deselect this and go right here to fill hole, it should yell at me, which is not. Now it's being like, hey, you know, whatever, I'll be the cool guy and do everything. But anyway, it's supposed to yell at me and say that that does not meet the definition of a hole. But this is what happens when you do this all live. Hey, not a bad problem to have, you know, Maya actually working when it's supposed to be breaking. I have an issue with fill hole by it's leaving a small indent that you can see in. Is that okay? That's definitely something that we have to see what's going on the Discord. So if you can, just drop in a screenshot. We can definitely take a look. All right, so with that said, we're gonna go right here. And fill the hole. And then we're going to multi-cut. This across. This across. And again, I'm just hitting right click to enter in the edge. And then we're good. All right. Now we did that. Let's go right here, hit apply, and we have no longer any N-gons there. So we're going to repeat that process. So I'm going to go right here, hit apply. And I'm seeing that this right here has several N-gons. So I'm going to go right here. I keep on almost saying Egon from like Ghostbusters, but N-gons. Anyway, so with that done, I'm going to hit apply. And I'm going to right click. And when it comes to diagnosing N-gons, the best way to do that is not using edge mode or face mode. You want to use vertex mode because those vertex will illustrate whether or not there's a break in that edge, making it into separate edges. So in this case right here, I'm going to right click, go into vertex mode, and I can see that we accidentally deleted edges without using control delete or the delete edge function. Now, the question is, do we need to draw these back in? Or can we just remove the vertexes? And in this case, we just look at the silhouette and see if they're doing one of two things: supporting a detail or changing a detail. In this case, it's doing neither. Look right there. This is not changing our detail. It's not supporting it. So I can go right here, shift right click, and delete those vertex. Or since it's the last part of that component upside down pyramid, I can just go right here and hit delete. What's up? Nope. Just in the, still doing the N-gons. The only thing I probably changed is apply to selected. Now, yeah, edges are the only thing that you can't really hit delete on because it can leave vertexes behind, but you can actually select vertexes and hit delete and it works perfectly fine. Likewise, you can delete a face and it won't leave anything behind because if you delete a face, then it can't leave behind a vertex or edge. What's up? No, we selected the edges that go around the hole. So what somebody just asked was, do you select the faces when you fill the hole? No, you select the edges that go around the hole and then you hit fill. The bottom faces? It will be, so the hole was right here. Actually, it's still selected. So I just selected those edges right there and hit delete. So pretty much I selected the big N-gon and then also the little faces that were making that little divot as well too, because that divot really is not there. Like I said, it's my heavy-handed attempt to force an issue. All right. What's up? So not redrawing them back in, yes, it would definitely mess with your edge flow because then it'd just be like a giant N-gon. Now, as far as this right here, this, no, not really. If we really need it to be, so we can also add edges so that way our mesh is uniform. But right now it's pretty evenly spaced with those edge loops right there. So really it's not going to mess with anything. But if we really wanted those edges to come back, and that's what somebody asked was whether or not deleting those vertexes would mess with our edge flow. Not really. If we wanted them back, we could just draw them back in. Because it's still wrapping around the right direction. Now there will be spoilers. One that if we delete it, yes, it will actually ruin the edge flow. Now, in this case right here, we're going to continue this around. We're going to go ahead and bring up our cleanup tool and double check this right here. So with this, we're going to go right here to our vertexes. And right now I'm seeing points on each one of these right here. So it doesn't look like anything wrong is going on. So again, we employ the very professional technique of grabbing this and doing the wiggle test and see if something weird's happening. And is anything weird happening? All right, so occasionally, and this is one of the issues with, building it flat. Again, if you can build something flat, keep it flat, you can always add thickness later. But occasionally you can actually go to extrude it and it will create what is almost like this skin across your object. So while we have 4 faces, we also have one giant face on top of that, which is close to being a lamina face if it actually shared all its edges with just one face. Instead, this shares it with 4 different faces. Now in this case, very easy. We just delete the face that doesn't need to be there. And then we can actually just snap this back to where it needs to be. So I'm going to hold down V as in Victor and pull this up until it snaps and aligns with one of these verts. Apply. That looks good. And then we can go to the last one right here. Control 1. Hit apply. And we can see that we have an N-gon there and an N-gon there. And this is where, yes, we have to observe whether or not the missing edge that accidentally got selected is necessary. And we have to perceive whether or not it is preserving a detail or changing it. In this case, it's preserving a detail because we go right here and we can always test this out. Select this object, go shift right click, go to insert edge loop tool. If I click right here in the area that is missing the edge loop, we can see that this is actually the boundary edge that is supposed to go around our blade, preserving that detail, meaning that these edges need to be drawn back in. Because again, it's following that edge loop that is preserving that indent of our blade. So right here, in this case, we're just going to draw and connect this back up. Yes. So if we're already, what somebody just said was, if we're already done modeling, why would we need to preserve the edge flow? Well, technically, going back to the big three, we're done modeling, and then we are cleaning up problem geometry. If we do have problem geometry, we're not done modeling. So essentially, we were correcting an issue. So what would probably happen right there was when we made selections, we were trying to delete something. And remember how Maya works. I can select other objects by mistake or other components by mistake and accidentally delete them. So essentially, that needed to be there. I just accidentally removed it. Now, the reason why you want to preserve your edge flow is because, again, edge flow trickles down through every part of the proficiency. While edge flow is important for our modeling, it gives us efficient models that give us greater detail with less geometry. You're about to find out when we go into UVing with that 3D cut and sew tool, if our edge flow is not set up properly, it makes our life harder using that tool. Likewise, if we don't have the edge flow properly set up on certain objects like a face or a body, then it won't animate correctly. We won't be able to do certain expressions. We won't be able to move muscles accurately, things like that, if we don't have that edge flow there. Answer your question? All right, sweet. All right, I'm gonna hit Control-1 to bring everything back. And then we're gonna go right here to mesh, clean up. Select it, hit Control-1. And then hit Control-1 to bring it back. Yep, select the object, hit Control-1, it isolates, hit Control-1 again to bring it back. You're welcome. All right, so I'm gonna select everything, hit apply, and it's not highlighting any of the ingons. That means I am done with that criteria. So now we're gonna go back to faces with holes, which we learned that sometimes when we fix one issue, it can actually fix another issue. So in this case, it works out for us. Next, we're gonna go right here to lamina faces, hit apply. And we're not getting any lamina faces. Awesome. And then last but not least, the worst part of problem geometry, non-manifold geometry. And we are getting several different highlights. Now, again, remember, yellow, we have to fix. That is non-manifold geometry. Green is non-manifold UVs. Those typically are fixed when we do the last stage of our big three, which is when we reset our UVs. That typically 9 times out of 10 fixes that issue. So we don't worry about UVs. Now, the problem is that sometimes green will show above yellow, which means we may have non-manifold geometry, but we're seeing green, but it still has an issue with the geo. A good way to figure this out is if it highlights the mesh, even if we see green, that means that there is non-manifold geo. Another thing is also notice how it's still selecting some faces. So that's good. It finally happened. It is remembering the selection, which is messing up my life right now. So instead, to fix this issue, what I'm gonna do right here, I'm gonna clear my selection by selecting all my faces, clicking off, going back into object mode and rerunning this. That is essentially clearing my selection out of Maya's memory, because remember, Maya has this weird habit of helping us in the wrong ways. All right, so we want to clear out that selection so that way it only shows the problem geometry. So if we look right here, we got a couple of green dots right here, but we're getting a lot of yellow dots right here. So if we remember, there's a couple ways that we can go about seeing our issue a little bit more clear. First, we can go right here to shift right click, go to the vertex faces, and look in between our object. Which we can already kind of see that there's faces inside there. Another way is, who remembers the other way that we can actually really highlight an issue with our object? Yep, smooth preview. Exactly. If we hit 3, we can look at our object in smooth mesh, which is very, very good about highlighting major issues, because if we see it deforming in a weird way that is not predictable, that usually means that there's probably problem geometry causing it to act up. If we look right there, we're getting all these weird dimples. All right. So that's another way. The last way is, if we wanted to select this object, I'm going to hit 1 key to go back. But if we go right here and have it selected, which again, I do not know why you are being selected, but I can also hit Control 1. Control 1 will only show the issues that are selected, which is a great way to kind of very quickly find these issues, especially going into your Lego man. When you go to bevel, it's going to make very, very small n-gons and non-manifold geometry. That's going to be kind of hard to see. So it is good to actually run this tool and then hit Control 1. So that way it only shows those issues so you can actually track them down a little bit easier. But with this right here, we can already see that there's faces on the inside of this that need to be deleted. So we're going to go right here. Go into face mode. I'm going to select all these faces, but then I'm going to hold down Control, deselect those faces, hold down Control, deselect those faces. So that way only these are still there, and just hit delete. And then I'm going to double check this by hitting 3 and making sure that it's still displaying correctly. So now it's actually displaying good. Go back, hit 1. Apply. So notice when I go right here and search this for non-manifold geometry, I'm getting only green dots, but it's not selecting the mesh. I'm getting 3 green dots, but it's not actually actively selecting the mesh. That means I only have non-manifold UVs. That's how you can actually tell whether or not you have only non-manifold UVs or whether or not you have non-manifold geometry hiding behind that those green dots. If it doesn't select the mesh, you're good. All right, next, we're gonna go right here. I'm gonna select this. I'm going to hit apply, and we're getting this all the way around. So stop me when you see the issue. All right. All right. What do we need to do? So these are flipped incorrectly. So what is a quick way to fix this? Conform, exactly. Which menu? Yes, exactly. Mesh display, conform. Again, if you go right here to mesh, conform, you'll get this error right here where it says there's no live surface. That is the wrong conform. We need to go right here to mesh display, conform, and we're now in business. All right. And then we'll hit apply. And then lastly, let's go ahead, select all this, apply, and we are good. I think we are done with problem geometry. So I'm gonna go right here, select everything on, make sure that we are applying it to all. Nothing's getting highlighted, so we are good. So at this stage, I may want to save. Now, remember, when we fix problem geometry, it makes a hell of a lot of history. You want to make sure that you're deleting that history before you're doing major saves. So, we're gonna go right here, select everything, delete by type, history. We're gonna go right here to file, save as, and then 001 at the end of my scissors. Continue. And then from there, we are done with step 1 and step 2. We are done modeling. We are clean the problem geometry. Last but not least, we have to do the last one, step 3, which is if we go right here, go into UV editing, select this object. That's its UVs currently. That mangled mess of spider webs. We do not want to even try to lay our UVs with that in that mangled mess state. So with that, we're gonna go right here, UVs, and just tell it to camera based. So now these are all merging together. Now, occasionally, even if we do that, some stuff may remain cut. In this case right here, we have a cut right here on the handle. We can sit here and discuss the philosophies and the ideas and the theories and the conspiracy theories of why that edge is remaining cut no matter what we try. Or we could just really rebuild it real quick. In this case, we're just going to select that, remove the area, fill the hole, and then quad it up. And guess what? That cut's not there anymore. Again, pick your battles. It's good to know why everything happens, but sometimes that is not conducive when it comes to deadlines and meeting them. So sometimes it's just better to not even try to solve what the issue is, instead figure out what the solution is. Now, with that said, now we're ready to start cutting this apart. And in this case right here, it is completely up to you whether or not you want to use projection, whether or not you want to use just selecting edges, or you want to use the 3D cut and sew. What's up? So what somebody just said was, if you go to the UV editor and everything is lighting up red, do you need to worry about it? Not this time, because we haven't even started UV layouts. So if it is still that way when we are getting done with UVs, then that's the issue. But right now, remember with Maya, it gives you that wiggle room where you can have it be wrong for a while because it knows that you're working on it still. It's just as long as the end result is correct, then you're good. Now, with this, we're gonna go right here, UV editing. Go to the 3D cut and sew tool. And what we want to do is just kind of cut this apart based off of where is drastically changing angles. Because again, we're trying to lay this flat. So for this handle, more than likely it's going to be probably cutting the top away from the sides and then away from the bottom, right? That's usually how you would probably lay that flat. Now, the cool thing is that we kind of have the edge flow working with us. Now, I'm gonna go right here, go to view. I'm gonna go to the checkered pattern right here, and I want this to turn off. Actually, I need to turn it off in somewhere else. Actually, I hit 5. Actually, I'm gonna just turn it off altogether. Now, just to let you know, that checkered pattern for some of y'all on 2022 and also 2020.4 for Monterey is very broken. So if you go right here and hit the checkered pattern, your object may completely disappear. Now, it's still there, it's just not showing it. The workaround is this. Instead of using the checkered pattern, we can actually make a checkered shader. So go right here, assign new material, make a new Lambert. We're gonna name this checkered pattern. And then assign a checkered to it. And then also make sure that it actually assigns it to it. So I'm gonna go right here. Checker, there we go. And then now we hit 6 and there's a checkered pattern. And once we're happy with it, we can go ahead and apply back the Lambert 1. Now that is the workaround. If the checkered pattern is working for you, good. If not, that's your workaround. Now with that said, I'm going to turn it off because it's really annoying. So with that, let's go ahead and start cutting this apart. So if we look, we can actually definitely tell where there is a huge change in surface direction. We have the top is going flat and then it makes a turn to the side. What is also in areas of huge changes of direction? What tool did we probably use there? Or are we seeing channeling around the edges? A bevel. A bevel is a good indicator of probably where you probably need to make a UV cut. So For this, we're just going to go right here. I'm going to grab my 3D cut and sew tool, and let's go ahead and start selecting that bevel. So I'm going to pick the middle one. And this is where that power of that edge flow is going around. See how it's kind of looping around? So clicking one edge almost goes around the entire part of my edge right here for the top. Now, it hits that junction, so it stops. So I just need to complete that. So now I have this separated, but is it its own UV shell yet? No. What's keeping it together? Yep, the finger hole right there. So it's still one UV shell. So I still need to cut this apart right here. So I'm going to pick one of these edges. And now we have it separated. So I can go right here to UV shell, select this, pull it away, and we're good. And from there, we just repeat the same process. So I'm going to go right here. I'm going to go back to edge mode. Select this. Now, if you're having a hard time and it's not working inside your 3D view, realize that we can make the same selections over here. Granted, it's not as fun, but we can actually do it inside the 3D view as needed as well, too. So now I have my sides. I have my finger hole right here. And then I have my top and bottom. Now, this is where we can start talking to ourselves and figure out, did I cut this apart enough? Can it lay flat and accurately display any image that I apply to it? And here's the thing, with UVs, we get a lot of wiggle room. You can't destroy them, so we can always test this out. So in this case right here, I always play the game of, can it lay flat or does it need an extra cut? So this right here, this top part, if I was to go to unfold, will it lay flat or do I need an extra cut? All right, let's see. We can unfold it, throw in our checkered pattern, and it's laying flat now, and it's accurately displaying our checkered pattern. So it's good right here. If the top is good, then probably the bottom is good too. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit unfold. And is it accurately displaying our checkers? Are we getting nice squares? Is it showing it the way that it should be shown? We're good. What about the sides? Does it need a cut or can it lay flat? So a lot of people are saying it needs a cut. So we can always test this. Go right here and hit unfold, and it starts turning into a gnarly Hot Wheel track, which means when we go right here and start looking at our objects, see how it's bending, skewing our image. So that's usually a good indicator that yes, this needs to be cut. Now, where do we cut it? Well, it all comes down to our camera angle. How are we going to see this? If this is a advertisement for these scissors, well, we typically want to probably hide our seams away from the camera. So if we're looking this way, probably gonna add a cut on the other side. Now, let's go right here, re-unfold the UVs, and now it's laying out straight. Looking like a snake skin. All right. And then likewise, finger hole, does it need a cut or can it lay flat? Let's go ahead and hit unfold and see if it's bending or disrupting the UVs. And in this case, yes, it is. So definitely, yes, we just need a cut. Now in this case, I can just go right here. Select my 3D cut and sew tool. And hit unfold. And we're good. Now, with that said, with what we know about UVs, can anybody say why this right here, how long it is, how that would be a problem? Yes, so what somebody just said was you have to scale it down to fit the size of the box. The problem with that is textile density. For me to scale this down, it also means I have to scale these even more down, which means to accommodate something that long, it's going to force everything to be smaller, which means it gets less resolution of the texture. So in this case right here, it would be beneficial if I just cut that in half. And that's where, again, is it a needed seam? Probably not, but it is needed in the case for maintaining a good resolution for all my objects. So in this case right here, we're just going to pick probably the tip right here and separate that. Now again, keep in mind, we select edges in this view, it will also select the edges that it's connected with. So when I go to move stuff around, it will mess up my UV. So again, make sure that you're only selecting UVs in this view. Also, remember, soft select works inside of the UV editor, but you have to be careful about because that can also mess up with your UV. So again, make sure that they are green when you select them. All right, so that one's done. So for the most part, I'm not going to worry about anything at this point. I'm just going to stick these off to the side, get them out of the way. Because we're in the phase of, again, we did the big three. So now what we're technically doing is doing our cutting and unfolding, separating into different pieces. But since we're doing a collage layout, we want to do this for all the pieces because there's no point of trying to lay them out in the 0-1 space until we have all the pieces of the puzzle. Now, let's go right here. And pretty much repeat the same process on this one right here, since it's pretty much the same shape. So I'm gonna go right here, turn off that, separate the top from the bottom, cut the finger hole, cut the bottom right there, and then do the same thing on the bottom. Likewise, we're gonna do our vertical cuts for the side, for the inside of the finger hole. And then again, we want to separate these. So I'm going to just go ahead and add and cut right there. So we're going to go right here. Separate these. And again, we're going to test it out. So I'm going to go right here, hit unfold, hit unfold, hit unfold, hit unfold. Now, again, it may look like unfold is a miracle tool. The scissors are still not really considered complex geometry. So it's able to do like, wonders. Now, when you get into more complicated objects, it's going to be a little bit more of like unfold, kind of gets you a good foundation, but then you go and actually correct it. Now, we have these all separated. We have these all unfolded. So I'm going to get these all kind of situated. Now, this is where I really talk about picking our battles. So, depending on what we're trying to do, you noticed there's a little peg right here. Now, we didn't even UV. We just kind of left it as part of the object. And really, at the end of the day, you ask yourself, how are we seeing these? So if there is no way for us to see that peg whatsoever, I wouldn't waste time at all to unfold it or cut it apart so that way it can actually lay out without any distortion. If we were shooting a Bug's Life on top of that peg, then yes, we have to make sure that it's laid out properly. And again, if you can understand how your asset is being viewed and its purpose in the final product, that lets you assess what you have to model, where you have to model, and what you actually have to do when it comes to UVing and texturing. Again, that's 90, actually, if you ever get interested about compositing, 90% of compositing is putting up pictures in the background to make it look like, hey, there's buildings, there's all this other stuff right there. It's called matte painting. And since they know the shots, they know how to arrange stuff to make it look like, all right, those are 3D objects. When in fact, all it is just an image way in the distance. Now, in this case right here, since we're teaching, we're going to go ahead and cut this part just so that we can have a little bit of extra practice. So I'm going to cut this away from the other part right there. I'm going to cut off the end cap, and then I'm just going to separate the seam right here. So that way, when I go ahead and select all this, UVs, select all these, hit unfold, then now we can separate them. And again, it really comes down to how we would see it. If it was part of an advertisement and there was no way for us to see that peg, I wouldn't have gone through this process. And we're definitely going to see the same logic get applied to the little pin that we barely see any part of that is holding the blades together. Now, with that said, we are done with these. Now let's go ahead with the blades. Now, so far, we've been kind of using the logic of, and this is the logic that is used on a lot of hard surface objects, which is we're essentially just kind of separating the sides, like, cutting off the top from the bottom and the sides, keeping them separated. Now we're going to go with what I like to call like the cardboard box approach, which is if you ever get like a package from Amazon or anything that arrives in a box. Well, if you look at the cardboard box, all you have to do is just separate one corner and the whole thing can lay flat with flaps and all. And the same logic can be applied to that right here. So instead of just cutting the top away from the bottom and having the sides be separate, how about we keep the sides as part of one of the top or bottom parts and just have them flap out, and just only put cuts in areas that need to be relieved. I guess the best word would be, say, stress. So if it's stressing our UVs, then we would actually make a cut, essentially making flaps. So let's go about that process. So with this one right here, I'm going to turn off my checker pattern. And what I want to do is just cut the bottom completely away from the sides and the top, because I'm going to leave the top and the sides as one piece, reducing my seams. So I'm going to go right here, turn off the checker pattern, and then I'll cut away the bottom. And again, if your 3D cut and sew tool is not working in the 3D view, you can make the same selections inside of here. And we're just following that edge around. And when I make this last cut, we will see it make that separation. So now I have my top, my bottom, which I'm going to go ahead and unfold. And it's laying out flat and nice, which is good. But now let's go right here and select the top and hit unfold. And it's looking okay. But if we look right here, the sides are still connected. And we can kind of see that it's kind of like oddly bulging, moving around, warping to maintain those edges, those corners. What's up? So when I say, and somebody's asking what is the tool doing as far as what is not working, I mean, like if you go to try to select something in the 3D view, it will actually have the selection be way far away from your cursor. So like literally it'll be like you're touching it here and then like a mile above it will be like, where it's actually making that selection. Now, if it is not doing anything, make sure that you are in edge mode. It will only work in edge mode. And that's the weird thing about the 3D cut and sew tool, is because it's activating a couple macros at the same time. So essentially when you activate it, it is activating edge mode, turning on multicolor and shaded, and then also activating your checkered pattern, which sometimes doesn't do all those correctly. So sometimes we have to kind of complete that. So if you have issues with it, definitely like save and then like show Erica and Wade when you're in lab today. With that said, we can see right here that it's kind of bending around the corners. So if we take the logic of a cardboard box, instead of having it be connected at the corners, we can actually relieve that stress, that bending, by just making a couple incisions. And in this case, we're just going to do our stress cuts at the corner. So that way this will lay out flat. So with this one right here, and again, we can do this inside of the UV editor if we want to. So I'm going to double click that edge. So it's going to separate that. Double click this edge right here, that corner. So it separates. So that way, if I was to go right here and hit unfold, now see how it's no longer bending to try to absorb that stress at those corners. Now it's laying out a little bit more flat. Yes, does it create seams? Yeah. But also, if you've ever looked at metal, especially like sheared metal or cut metal, it has distortions at these angles. So we can actually hide seams in plain sight. Again, it all comes down to our understanding of the object and how it's going to be seen. Now, we're going to continue making these cuts. Probably do one right there at that angle. And then last one in these corners. Essentially, made a cut there, made a cut at this corner, made a cut at this corner. And you're probably noticing I'm like picking the middle edge of my bevels. And that's just kind of, you know, what I usually do. That's my preference. And then we select that edge right there and that edge right there. Now with this selected, we're going to hit it with another unfold. And now we're getting a lot cleaner of a layout. Now we got seams in the corner, but really, if we look at them, how noticeable are they? Not really. We didn't even have those cut white lines, we probably wouldn't even notice them. And again, remember, checkered pattern is giving us just visual feedback, very, very quick feedback. At the end of the day, we're not applying a checkered pattern to it. Actually, we're going to show you how we apply images to this if we wanted to, a little bit later. So with that said, hit Control-1, bring this back. So we did that on that blade. So we just repeat the same process on the other blade, right? So here's the thing. There's a reason why we don't copy and paste. And instead, we use either clone or duplicate. When we clone and duplicate, it preserves the structure of the object, which means it not only recreates the geometry, but also it makes sure that any UVs that are laid out for it come along for the ride. So instead of me laying out the other blade, what could I do? Delete it and just duplicate it. That way I don't have to lay out the UVs again. Now, good rule of thumb, if you're going to duplicate the bejesus out of something, I'm talking about like a bead on a chandelier, which those can be in the thousands of duplications. Pro tip, make sure that you name it, make sure that you lay out UVs, and make sure that you apply whatever texture / shader you want on it before you duplicate, because any of those duplications will retain that information. If you don't, guess what you gotta do? Yes. So we're gonna duplicate, delete that. And again, that's another thing that you can use as well too. I know inside, how many people have started watching the Lego Man tutorials? All right, so another pro tip I can tell you, I duplicate out the hand and the arms and the legs, just so that at the end of primary form and secondary form, there's like this sense of completion. But honestly, do not duplicate your arms and legs or hands until one, you're completely done modeling it, it's clean the problem geometry, and then once you are done UVing it. Once you have all three of those things done, then I would duplicate it over. But in this case, we're gonna go right here. I'm gonna move my pivot. Let's say about right there. So that way, when I duplicate by hitting Control-D, I can go right here and just spin this over. -180. And then since it's slightly off, I'm just gonna go right here. Just move it back to where it needs to be. I think we're good. So now both the blades are laid out by just doing one and duplicating over. Last but not least, we got this little peg. And like I said, same process that we would use on that nub on one of the handles. How much of this are we really seeing? And how much can we just kind of minimize our work? So we could probably get away with a lot of stretching because, well, there was no way possible to see most of this object. So we're going to probably make a few less cuts. So in this case, I go right here, turn off my checkered pattern. And then we are going to go right here to my 3D cut and sew tool. And I'm going to probably just keep these edges right here as part of this top part. So first thing I'm going to do, cut this apart. Now, this right here is too much of a change in direction to keep this together. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that apart. And then last but not least, I'll probably keep this top part right here as part of the sides, but then cut it away from here. Now we can always test this by, again, will it lay flat or does it need an extra cut? So in this case, this top part, does it need an extra cut or can it lay flat? Well, we can always test it by smushing it down and seeing how it looks. In this case, looks pretty good. We're getting slight stretching right here. But in the grand scheme of things, would you ever notice? And that's the thing. Right now, we are professionals. So we could probably, if we looked hard enough and had it paused and knew where to look, we could probably spot these issues. But our audience is not that. It just needs to hold long enough for the shot. So next part right here, we're gonna hit Control-1. I'm gonna go to UVs, bring this over, and hit unfold. Now this tube, does that need a cut or can it lay flat? It could lay flat, but we're getting some pretty gnarly stuff right here. So in this case, yeah, I would make a cut. Unfold. Unfold. Careful. And then last but not least, let's go ahead and get a cut on this one right here, which is our little tube. So I'm making one last cut. Nope, making too many cuts. And I'm gonna go to UV mode, double click this, and hit unfold. Honestly, that's good enough for me. All right, so now we got everything selected. We are now officially done with the cutting and unfolding part. Now we're in the business of layout. This is where, if you've ever played Tetris, this is where you're gonna come alive. We have to fit every one of these into the 0-1 space, because that's the only place that will receive the texture. And if it's in the 0-1 space, we can predict how it's going to display that texture. Next, we can't have any overlapping. Overlapping means that they're going to share the same detail, which is going to cause issues if we're trying to paint unique detail. Next, we want to make sure that we are maintaining textile density. We have to make sure everything is the same size ratio. And then also, lastly, we want everything to be flipped correctly so that way it displays it in the right direction. So at this stage, we are done with our 3D cut and sew tool. I'm gonna go right here to UVs, editor, go to view, go to shaded, hit the option box, and I wanna go right here, switch it from multicolor to front and back facing. And hit apply. And then I just want to make sure that everything is blue. Next, let's go ahead and sample one of these. Go into transform, scroll down, set our map size to 2048. Again, we don't have to set that, but it's good practice. 2048 is going to be our 2K texture. So 2048 by 2048. This is essentially just telling it what unit of measurement it's going to use: millimeters, centimeters, meters, so on and so on. But with this selected, we're going to hit get to sample it, and then select all of these and hit set. And last but not least, just going right here, start cramming these in. Now keep in mind, if we need to rescale these, we want to make sure that we're selecting all our UVs and scaling them as one. Also, we want to make sure that we are taking up as much of the 0 to 1 space as possible. Anything that's not covered by UVs means that it is resolution that is not being used. Now we can get them very close to each other, just can't have them overlapping. Actually, and I can already tell I'm gonna have to resize these. But I still want to get close enough. Now we can put things like this inside the open areas if we wanted to be a little bit more efficient. All right, now I'm gonna select all of these. Hold down D as in dog, X as in X-Men, and just move my pivot to the origin of my UV editor. So that way when I scale, come back here. Kind of maintains its shape. Now we just need to get these guys in here. Now, if we need to turn and we want to be a little bit more precise, inside the transforms, we have rotate, and we can specify how much we want it to rotate. So this can be a little bit easier to kind of flip stuff around. Fun stuff. All right, so what we're looking at right here is now what we call a collage format. That's because, remember how we were talking about shaders? We talked about Lamberts, we talked about blends, fongs, fongies, and then also the notion that they are archaic, they're kind of obsolete, because the notion of having a shader specifically made to be either matte or shiny or kind of shiny or super shiny. All that is gone. Instead, we can actually apply one shader to the entire object. And by giving it different textures, I can have that one object look like it's wood, look like it's metal, look like it is skin, all with one shader. And to help be efficient about that, if we can have all our objects in the collage format, that means that we have less maps that we have to draw, because remember, color is only one part of the equation. We will learn that on Sunday when we kind of start showing you different aspects of these PBR workflows. But with that said, this is our first lecture activity. So I'm gonna go right here. And I want to give you the right information. So we're going to go right here, make sure that we are in 2-panel view. A lot of people are missing their submission guidelines. People are turning in correctly done work, but completely blowing it when it comes to making sure that wireframe unshaded or picking the right panel view. All that stuff is done correctly. They're like losing points, and that does add up. So make sure, it may seem like these submission guidelines are all the same, but each one is slightly different. In this case, we want to be in 2-panel view, perspective view, and the UV editor, which is what we're currently in. Set the model to have the checkered pattern displayed in the perspective view, but not in the UV editor. And what that looks like is this. We want to have our checkered pattern turned on, but we want to click off this icon, which is our display. Clicking that off will have it only display inside of our perspective view, but it will turn it off inside of our UV view. Next, you can have an amazing layout. But if it's up here, it's automatic 50. And again, we're trying to do it on smaller, low stake projects. This right here is worth like 3%. But if you accidentally do this on your Lego man, not only does that prevent you from doing the Substance Painter, but you won't be able to get any textures out to bring into Unreal, essentially wiping out probably 30% of your grade. So it's better to learn it from this right here at a lower stake price than to have it pop up on something that is very major. Because if we brought this in the Substance Painter, we would not be able to do hardly anything on it, because Substance Painter only looks for UVs that are in the 0 to 1 space. So there we go. We're going to take our only lecture activity, screenshots, and we're going to go to File, Save As, and we're going to name this Scissors. Now, whatever. Now, with that said, the next part that I'm going to do is completely optional. You don't have to do this, but it's very hard to get you excited about UVs without showing you what their end result is actually bring you to, which is the ability to paint your own textures. What we showed you with your UVing, with the projection of the apple, doing the column, the crate, all that stuff right there, that was all ass backwards. When you UV, you're UVing to have a template so you can draw on and make your own textures. We don't actually give you a texture and you match up. Instead, you take this into a photo program or a 3D painting program and paint your own. Now, this is not going to be a thorough tutorial, nor is this going to even scratch the surface of trying to teach you to learn Photoshop. Now, let you know, all of y'all through your tuition have access to LinkedIn Learning. Everybody knows that, right? All right. So not the best tutorials for Maya, but one thing that they do knock it out of the park with is tutorials on Photoshop. If you do not know Photoshop, please take the time and learn it, because meanwhile, we have all these great programs. Photoshop is not going anywhere, and there's always money in Photoshop. So
yes, I have a question about something.
Yes, what's your question?
Yes, I had a hard time trying to bring up the view tab, and one of the the person's working here told me to do was go into view editing, and I went and did that, but it still didn't bring up the view tab
What view tab?
on Maya. That view
Oh,
tab.
hit with your cursor over. What he's talking about is the menus right here. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Hit shift, the shift key, and M. Shift M will hide your menus inside your viewport.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And again, I don't know why that's a hotkey. Like, really, do you need those 5 layers of pixels back? Like, I don't know why, like, they have the option to disappear them, but they do. Anyway, so with that said, definitely if you have a chance, learn Photoshop, because it is one of those skills. Even though we are learning about 3D painting, Photoshop is not going anywhere, cemented by the fact that they own Substance Painter. They bought it, and then they have like an actual link between Photoshop and Substance Painter. But with that said, first we need to get our UVs out. And when I said that UVs are essentially $1 million coloring book, I was not lying, because how we actually bring this into Photoshop is to do this. We're gonna go right here with it selected, all our UV selected. We're gonna go to image, UV snapshot, or we can click this little camera. Inside of UV snapshot, we can browse. Now in this case, it will always default to images, because once we paint our texture, we don't really need our UV snapshot anymore. So images is almost treated like a temporary folder. We place stuff in there that we're going to probably delete later. Now in this case, I'm gonna go ahead and name this scissors UV. Hit save. We're gonna go to image format. We want to pick PNG. Do not use JPEG. JPEG is a trash format. Instead, we want to use PNG. Now, later on, you will use more complicated formats, but PNG gives us 2 things that are important. 1, it doesn't compress our image unless we actually tell it to. And 2, it provides us with an alpha, which is the ability to see through our image, which is going to be very important in a few minutes. Next, we want to set our resolution. In this case, we're setting this as 2048 by 2048, which is a 2K map. From there, we want to give our edges a color, so that way they're a little bit more distinguished, so they pop out more. I picked the Seahawk green to make them really stand out. And then from there, we go to apply and close. And when it does that, it will actually save out our UVs inside of our folder, inside of image folder, and give us this, a coloring page. You click on the camera. Yep. Once we do that, and again, none of this is mandatory whatsoever, but like I said, it's hard to get y'all excited about UVs without showing you what we can do with them. So now we're done going to Photoshop. Do we need to have the checkerboard pattern active in the screenshot? Yes, only in the 3D view, not the UV editor. So now, lo and behold, the texture from last month. So we're gonna go right here, file, open, and we're gonna navigate to that image. We're gonna go right here to documents, 3DF, and week 3. Lecture 8, wrong lecture. Getting ahead of myself. Go into scissors, go into image, grab this. And it's going to open up, and this is exactly what we need to see, which is we see our lines, but anything that is not covered by a line is transparent, allowing us to paint underneath it. What's up? Yes, that's by design. Yep. So what somebody just said was their checker pattern's only showing up when they have something selected. That is by design. Now, if that is annoying, like as far as having it selected and having it show, we can deactivate selection highlighting, but really it doesn't matter if it's selected. But yeah, it needs to be selected for it to even display that, because you can only see the UVs for what you have currently selected. Yep. So, yep, it is okay to have it selected for the screenshot. Yes. All right. So with this in here, I'm gonna go right here to go UV, and then I'm gonna go right here and make a base layer. And then we're going to go right here. We're going to fill that layer by going right here to edit fill, and I'm gonna make this black. So that way we can see what's going on. So now that we have that set up, in between these two layers, I'm going to actually paint what I want to display on here. Anything that I paint underneath these UVs will display on my object in that location. Again, this is giving me an idea of where I paint, where it's going to display. So again, I'm just, UVs is just setting up the outlines for you to actually color in. In this case right here, I'm gonna go right here, make a plastic layer. And I'm gonna select all my plastic. Minus, I think these are like the metal parts right there. All right, so this is gonna be my plastic. Go right here. Let's make this purple. Okay, hit fill. I'm gonna fill this with foreground color. Now that's all purple. Then underneath, I'm gonna make metal. Now, I'm gonna just invert that selection. So I can go right here to select, inverse, or I can hit the hotkey. But now I'm gonna just make these gray. Getting a whole bunch of rain farts right there. And that's gonna be my gray for my metal. Image, edit, fill, foreground color. Okay. All right, from there, I'll go ahead and hit Control D to deselect. Now I'll let you know, if you're on Mac, instead of Control, you hit Command. Photoshop and all Adobe products, for the most part, make the full transition between using Control or Command if you're on Mac. Meanwhile, Maya does not observe any of that. So with that, we're gonna go right here. I'm going to make this black, and then I'm gonna just name this Made in 3DF. I'm gonna hit Control T so I can spin this around, put this where it needs to be. And then last but not least, I'm gonna go right here, turn off my UV editor. I'm gonna go right here to File, Save As. And this is going to be to save as a copy. This is gonna be my diffused. So I'm gonna go right here, Documents, 3DF, go to week 3, lecture 7. Gonna name this Scissors. Source images, diffuse. But next, I'm gonna go right here. Oh, I don't want to save that as a PNG. I don't want that as a PNG. Oh no, it's saved as a PNG. Awesome. All right. Did it? Let's double check that. Nope. All right. File. Save a copy. And we're gonna save it in the source images. And I'm gonna name this, yeah, diffuse. And then now that's saved as a whatchamacallit. But now I'm gonna go right here. I'm gonna duplicate this. I'm gonna desaturate this. And then I am going to give it noise. And noise. Make that monochromatic. Okay. I'm gonna blur that out a little bit more. Blur. And I am going to name this file, save copy, and PNG. Go to scissors. Go to the source images. And we're gonna name this bump. So now, with that all saved out, give you a preview of what we use with this right here. So I'm gonna go back in here and I'm going to get out of UV editing, go back to general, Maya Classic, and I'm gonna select this and give it all just a blend. Now we will be using a different type of material on Sunday, but we can go right here. And since we have a unique collage layout, I can actually apply multiple colors across the entire object because it's using that that UV layout. It's still botched up to tell it where to display the information. So in this case right here, I can tell it, hey, display purple on some parts, display metal on the other parts, and then also display the made in 3DF. But like I said, let's go right here, Alt 5, turn that off. Color is only one part of the equation. Not only can we affect its ambient color, transparency, incandescence, things like that, we can also use images to essentially model for us. So if I go right here and add in my bump, we can give the illusion of extra detail being there. And that's where we start getting into the idea of tertiary form, where we use images to actually model detail for us. This is one of 3 main factors that we'll talk about on Sunday. But without our UVs, none of this matters because we have to lay out the roadmap on what we want. And if I go right here and turn up 5, we can really make it look craterous. Granted, that doesn't look very comfortable, but we've definitely toned that down to look a little bit closer to plastic. But with that said, that is it for lecture. Like I said, as we get further in the month, the lectures do get shorter. With that said, a couple announcements. Again, just letting you know, some of y'all may have issues trying to use some of these tools on your Maya Mac version Monterey. Again, if you haven't yet, definitely check out, I think it's on 1.fullcell. They have a section that talks you through how to do a downgrade on your OS to get back to Big Sur, I believe. If that does not work, again, installing Windows can be an option as well too. I can actually post a video to the announcements. If you're curious about that, again, do it at your own risk. I'm going to say, you know, Maya is not going to be easier to use on Windows or anything like that. But if you're more comfortable with one versus the other, that's an option right there. Second, make sure that you're getting assistance. So if you're campus, make sure that you're asking questions in lab. If you're online, make sure that you're attending the Discord help sessions. There is going to be one tomorrow from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. So definitely make sure that you utilize that. Second, we will be having lecture on Friday, obviously. That will be us taking our objects from Maya into Unreal. Lastly, realize that we do have one last Sunday lecture, which I'll talk about on Friday. So make sure that you're aware of that and watching the content. Outside of that, that is about it. Y'all take care. Hope you had fun.
Yes, Mr. Jared.
Yes.
So I had a question. Two of them actually.
Okay.
For the life of me, I have my Lego Man stuff put in there. I have the workspace in there, but when I go to try and put the file in there, there's no Lego Man file or anything. Am I doing something wrong?
So with something like that, it's definitely better if you can somehow show us a video of the steps that you're taking and the question that you're asking. So visually, it would be better to see this happen. So if you can, on Discord, if you go into the information section on the left side, there is a can you send a image or video. It will walk you through how you can actually use Vimeo to take a video of your issue and be able to post that so we can get better visual feedback of what you're trying to ask.
Okay. And my second question is, when is the Lego Man currently due?
It is due next Monday.
Next Monday.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.